Hi, I am Shannon Young. I'm a math coach.
Hi, I'm Christy McCluskey. I teach kindergarten at Lithia Springs Elementary.
And we are going to dive into the kindergarten unit of joining and separating. We're excited that you have joined us today. All right, so for our first task, what you're going to do is first you are going to solve the problem with your team. And Christy, you don't have a team, but I'll solve them with you. And then we are going to talk about the difference between each word problem. We're going to talk about if there's an action that's happening in the word problem, and if so, what the action is that's happening. And then we are going to talk about the differences. So go ahead and we're going to pause the video while you're working, and the 4 problem types are going to come up. After those come up, you can go ahead and pause the video. You ready, Christy?
Yes.
All right. The standards from kindergarten to first grade. The blue is the kindergarten expectations, and the green are the first grade expectations. What do you notice, Christy, about the kindergarten versus first grade expectations?
So the kindergarten expectations focus more on exploration, whereas the first grade standards, they're expected to be able to recall the facts, and then the numbers that we use. So in kindergarten, we focus on 0 to 10, and then in first grade, the focus moves to 0 to 20.
Absolutely. All right, so let's get back into those tasks that we looked at. Here were the word problems that you did. Did you notice anything in particular about the word problems?
So in 2 of the word problems, 1 and 2, they have action involved, whereas number 3, there is no action, the same as number 4 also had no action.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that makes 1 and 2 easier to start with, easier for kids to learn the difference between joining and separating. We can see with problem type number 1, Noelle's actually putting the books on the shelves, and then with number 2, the mouse is taking the cookies away. So those are the actions we're putting together or we're taking away. And then when you look at 3 and 4, the panda bears are in the grass and they're in the pond. There's nothing happening to them. We are counting them together, but there's nothing happening. And then same with the keychains. Lily has those keychains that they're already on her backpack, and we're just being asked how many she has of each. So yeah, there's no action with those. Great thinking, Christy. All right, so we talked about the actions and the actions that are happening, the actions that are not happening, and these are our problem types that kindergartners are expected to learn. There's 4 of them. There's the add to result unknown, which is the Noelle problem, the take from result unknown, which is the Mia problem with the mouse, and that just means that the answer is unknown. That's what they have to figure out in the problem. And then put together total unknown, which they have to figure out the answer, again, the total, but they are not having an action with the problem. And then the both add-ins unknown put together problem, and that is the hardest. So you can see they're actually ordered in from 1 through 4 from easiest to hardest. And this is our problem chart that's going to come up in just a minute. And this shows the expectations of kindergarten students. So you can see, Christy, in the white that those 4 problem types are the 4 problem types we just looked at. And then the gray, the lighter gray are first grade expectations, darker gray are second grade expectations. So just because those light gray are first grade expectations, does that mean you can't ever expose some of your kids to those word problems?
No, that would be great for the higher learners to start exposing them to things they'll see next year.
Yeah, absolutely. So we just want to make sure that our kindergarten students are comfortable with and master those in white. However, we can always push them to deeper understanding. Okay, and here are our 4 different word problem types. And we want to make sure we're taking all of our word problems, starting at the concrete into the pictorial learning, and then into the abstract learning. So when you look here, what are some tools that you currently use in your classroom?
We have used the counters, the bears, the yellow and red counters, Unifix cubes, and and even mini erasers.
Yeah, exactly. And so if we're sending problems home with kids, we can give our parents the ideas of using beans or pasta or any kind of toy, really, any like Matchbox cars, those work just as well. So we want to make sure we are supporting our learners with the concrete examples. And here we can see we can act out the problem by modeling the action in the problem, especially with those first 2-word problem types. And then with this one, we can act out by modeling what's happening without forcing the actual action. So we can still represent the 3 pandas and the 2 pandas, and then we would just count them together versus actually putting them together. Here are just quick pictures of how our counters would be represented with these problems. We can see that Noelle, when she's putting the 5 books on the shelf, we're actually putting the counters together with those books. And then with Mia, we have the 5 cookies, and then she is taking 4 of them away. So we're actually doing the action of taking away. And then again with the pandas, we have the red counters representing the pandas that are in the grass, the yellow counters representing the pandas that are in the pond, and then we have the counters representing the unicorns and mermaids on Lily's backpack. All right, so we talked about how we want to make sure we're using tools with the problems, and really anything will work with actually like representing the problem. Here is just a quick example of Noelle's problem, and thinking about, we want to make sure we're asking good questions with our problems so our kids are understanding the problems better. So one example that you could ask is, what do the red counters represent in the problem? What do you think they might say? Yep, yeah, absolutely, books. You could dig a little bit deeper. Where are the books? And hope they say they're on a bookshelf. And then another example is, why did you put the books together, the 2 books together with the 5 books? And sometimes, Christy, like they tell you what kind of answer.
The problem said to put them together.
Yeah.
Miss McCluskey told me to put them together.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes those are the answers we get. And so we want to dig a little bit deeper. Why are we putting, where did you see like where to put those books, and how did you know to put them, the 2 together with the 5? And so just digging a little bit deeper will get those surface level responses out of the way. Great, and now we're going to get into the Mia problem. We have that she made the 5 cookies, and here are the 5 cookies, and then we can see the action of them being taken away. And so a couple questions that could be asked with this problem. Again, what do the red counters represent in the problem, or whatever you're using, and hopefully they tell you they're the cookies that Mia made, or they're the cookies that the mouse took. And then why did you take 4 cookies? And then hopefully they tell you the mouse took them away. So then Mia has how many cookies left?
1.
Yep, exactly. All right, and here is the panda problem. Remember, we had the red counters representing the pandas in the grass, and the yellow counters representing the pandas in the pond. Here are some questions again that you could ask. What do the red and yellow counters represent in the problem? Hopefully the kids tell you the pandas in the grass, the pandas in the pond, and hopefully they can tell you the difference. They can point to, these are the pandas in the grass, these are the pandas in the pond. And then when you ask them, why did you count all of the pandas together, what do you think they might tell you?
Because we were looking for the total number, so the problem told them.
Yep, yeah. And so we're trying to find all of the pandas. They don't necessarily have to use the total. They could, but they could say, I'm looking for how many pandas there are, or how many pandas are in the grass and in the pond, or all of the pandas. Definitely different ideas to share. All right, and then moving into that last word problem with Lily and the keychains on her backpack, we can see that the students have to represent the mermaid and the unicorn keychains. I have organized this nicely, but Christy, do you think your kids are going to organize this like this automatically?
Absolutely not.
No, definitely not. So you might have kids that come up with like the first example, but they maybe missed the second example that's being shown. So you can have one student share the first example, another student share the second, and it's really all about how you decide the students are going to share. If you share with that pattern being shown, then that is going to encourage them. And by you asking what patterns do you notice, that's going to encourage the students to kind of start to organize their thinking, making sure we're asking, again, like the same thing we ask every single time, what do the red and the yellow counters represent? Same thing with this problem. We're always, every problem, we want to make sure we're asking that one problem. And then again, how could you organize your thinking? Our kids are like, they're just not going to organize their thinking on their own, but with our support and our examples, our sharing, how we share, then that will help them with their organization and noticing of patterns as well. All right, and then so now we went from the concrete, now here's our pictorial representations. Pictorial representations just mean they're pictures that are either given to students or students can draw them themselves. Illustrations should be like familiar objects, like if I can draw a circle, then that's what I'm doing. It's not an elaborate drawing. Sometimes when we ask our kids, can you draw something to represent the duck? They want to take a lot of time and actually draw the ducks, but we want to make sure we're bringing the point across that in math, it's just a quick picture, just something that can tell me that you understand the problem. So we want to make sure we're letting our kids know that, and we're not giving them those opportunities to draw us beautiful, elaborate pictures, even though we know they like to. Some of these pictorial questions.
Same things. What do your pictures represent? What does the color you used, what does it represent?
Yeah, absolutely. And then again, bringing in why did you put them together, or why did you draw them together? Because if they can't really put the pictures together, but they can draw them together. So kind of asking that as well. And again, just like you said, what does your circle represent, or what does your picture represent? And then again, moving into possibly why did you cross out some of those? And just making sure that you understand why they crossed them out. Because if they tell you something about Mia, like because those are the ones Mia took, then that's not the right answer, right? So we want to make sure we're digging deeper with those kiddos. Same thing. What do your circles represent? Why did you count them all together? And then you can see the U's are representing the unicorns keychains, and the M's are representing the mermaid keychains. But we know that, but we want to make sure that we are asking, because I'm sure the kids are not going to automatically do U's and N's. That was just my thinking. So they could do rectangles and circles, but they could also draw that. So we want to make sure we're really understanding what they're representing. Here's an example of how an abstract model kind of goes from the pictorial to abstract. At this point, our kids do not have to master writing their own equations or expressions. It is part of learning about word problems, but if we're recording for them at this point in the year, that's perfectly okay. It's not an expectation of them. And if some of them can do it, then that's fine as well. So we want to make sure we are supporting them as they're ready. So at the top, you can see the pictorial or the concrete representation with the counters. And if we're talking about 5 books and 2 books together is the same as 7 books, that's kind of setting them up for understanding the addition symbol as being representative of and then the equation, or the equal symbol representing it as same as. Yep. And then, so what do you notice about the pictorial representation?
So it's their drawing they used to represent the books in the problem. And so they used different colors, and then they drew them together.
Yeah, absolutely. And then again, having them talk you through it, or you talking them through it. So are you saying 5 books and 2 more books are the same as 7 books? And then moving into an equation from there. And then concrete, representational, or abstract. Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference between when you're using a tool and what stage you're in. So our 10 frames, part whole maths, and number bonds are all tools that can support through each stage of the learning. And here I just use the problem with the pandas to kind of show. It's shown with the concrete representation, the pictorial representation, and then the abstract representation. Christy, do you think when you're in the pictorial or even the concrete part, you could have kids recording the numbers?
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. That will help with that transition into the abstract component, and then eventually getting into the writing of the equation or expression. All right, and number lines. Who loves number lines? All right, so we're trying, we're really working with number lines. I know they're a little bit tricky in kindergarten especially, but they're important because this standard actually says to use number lines. So it doesn't say that you have to use 10 frames or part whole maths or number bonds, but it does say you have to use number lines. So we want to make sure, how do you think, so up here, that first number line is blank. How do you think you might be able to use a number line in the concrete stage?
You could add your tools to, like your counters or your vehicles, set them
Yeah,
on the number line.
absolutely. That's one way to make that number line a little bit more concrete. So definitely, just like what Christy said, we can put our tools right on top of that number line and show what we're doing with them. Then we can take them away. That's what the problem's asking, or we can add more if that's what the problem's asking. And then that middle picture just shows how that can be connected to the pictorial by actually like showing how they're crossing out. The last one is a little bit more abstract because you can't tell that they're crossing anything out. You can't actually even tell where the student started. So that bottom number line, you'd have to ask some probing questions of that student. And hopefully that equation next to it is something that that student may have written to kind of represent what they did on the number line. All right, so there's definitely, our kids definitely come in with some misconceptions sometimes, even in kindergarten, we know that that happens. So what is one misconception that you've seen, that you may come across?
That just because they use the word in one word problem, that's the way it's going to be for all future word problems. And they need to look at each problem separately, independently from other problems.
Right, exactly. So that's kind of thinking about like along the lines of using keywords. When we use keywords, they don't always work. They tend to always work in kindergarten and in first grade, but then when we get to second grade, our students are coming across 2-step word problems, and then they see a couple keywords and they're not sure what to do. So that really doesn't set them up for success in future grade levels. Also, we have in third and higher with our state testing, our keywords are used as distractors in our state tests. So again, if we're using keywords in kindergarten and first grade, it's not necessarily setting them up for success in the older grades. And then what's another misconception that you may come across?
They don't know how to order the numbers in the problems necessarily. Do a subtraction, they need to start with the larger number, subtracting the smaller number, or not larger, but greater and fewer.
Yeah, so starting with the whole and then taking one of the parts away, absolutely. And so with this, the number line is actually the perfect opportunity to use here, because if they're starting with 2 and they're trying to take away 5, you can have them jump back on the number line and they're gonna try to end past 0 And right now, they're not learning anything on the other side. So then asking the students, what could you do? And, hopefully having them start with 5 and then taking 2 away after that. That will definitely help them. You can also go back to the concrete and using the tools. Here's 2, can you take away 5? And kind of going off of that. And our very last slide, we have our examples of concrete, representational, and abstract. Remember that we're not just moving forward and never backwards or going in between. We want to make sure with all of the problem types that we're flexible with our thinking for everything. Thank you, Christy, for joining us today. I appreciate it. It's quite the experience. And I hope that you all come back to join us for Unit 4. Thank you.